I'm ready.
Number 3.
Okay, we got.
Stand by.
Good evening. My name is Jay Thorwaldson, coming live to you from Mid-Penn Media's studios in Palo Alto. I served as editor of the Palo Alto Weekly for just over 10 years and still contribute occasional columns. I'm delighted you can take a break from our boring national election, our modern-day uncivil war, to join us this evening to go over some of the key races and issues reshaping the landscape of our local government. I'm joined by a current and former Palo Alto mayors, Liz Niss and Pat Burt, both with long experience in local issues in government and public service. Mayor Liz Niss has served for 11 years on the County Board of Supervisors and is currently in her 16th year on the Palo Alto City Council, serving 3 years as mayor. As a high-tech exec, Pat has been leader in sustainable manufacturing and environmental policy. In Palo Alto, he has served as a neighborhood leader, planning commissioner, council member, and served 2 terms as mayor. Welcome to you both. Since our time is short, let's get right to it. Starting with you, Liz, and then you, Pat. Can you speak about the race for Palo Alto City Council?
Thank you. Yes. So the race tonight was for 3 seats because if you recall, we're going from 9 seats down to 7, so it's pretty significant. I think the race was not unpredictable. Many people thought that Allison would finish first, which he has. Tom and Eric, who ran basically under the same organization, were elected, it looks like numbers 2 and 3 so far. Not all the returns are in yet. And Corey is running behind them, and then at the very bottom is Pat Boone, who is somebody who came in for the first time this year, who has not lived here very long, but jumped into the race, and good for him. So I think what we have seen tonight is support for somewhere between no growth and slow growth. And we'll see what comes as the result of that. But that's how I would see the outcome of the election tonight.
So the one-time outsiders have become the insiders. And turning to Pat, once a neighborhood leader, there was a time in Palo Alto when we had a 2-party system between the environmental establishment and the residentialists. Are we returning to that feeling at this time?
Well, I think we already had returned to it in recent years, and I hope and think that perhaps we're starting to move away from that again. Okay. Allison ran her campaign, a really strong campaign, with a deliberate approach of not trying to align herself with either group, although certainly her support was more from the development side, but she's been deliberate that she is not wanting to be aligned with a faction explicitly. I think it's really also interesting just the whole role of money in these elections, not just the council, but the school board and the open space district. Corey Wolbach raised the most funds and had a very strong campaign, and early results show him coming in 4th place and out of the race. We'll see later in the evening how that evolves. But it's interesting that money may not, and organization may not prevail.
So it could be upside down on the broader election picture.
But just as with the national race, we see in Palo Alto a cyclic nature of it. And having served for a long time, in the 90s, the type of races that were run were very individual. People didn't come together for parties later. They ran individual races. They might carry each other's material, but they didn't tend to get into slates. Right. I think we have, and I'm glad to hear you say, Pat, we may be moving away from that, but the slate issue has been one for the last 2 races and may have been somewhat this time. But I would agree with Pat totally. Allison carefully removed herself from any of the groups in particular, ran her own campaign, did a great job.
Right. And as I recall, she entered the so-called political field locally by unifying the fundraising for this, leading that effort to unify fundraising.
I think she will
for the
always be
schools.
known
For the
as
libraries.
yeah,
Library bond.
Libraries, the library bond, right.
she will be known as the person who almost single-handedly made the Mitchell Park Library a possibility.
That's right.
She didn't build it,
Yeah.
but she definitely is the one who stayed on target to get the bond money that allowed it to happen.
That's right.
Quite a feat.
It was. So, where next? Where do we go on the city council?
I think that's a good question. I'll be interested in what Pat says as well. I think we have come together over the past year more conclusively than we did before. It's going to be interesting now for Tom and Eric as they go into their second term and final term, because we have term limits, and as we have Allison come on, we already have Greg Tanaka, Adrian Fine, my miss Lydia Koo.
Right.
So we'll watch as this group comes together. Won't always gel, won't always vote together, but we'll see where we're heading this year. I hope we'll head finally towards some affordable housing. That would be my major hope. And I hope we finally get a bike bridge done and a couple of garages, and we're on track for that,
Right.
but we need to speed it up a little.
Okay. Pat, how do we balance affordable housing with slow growth?
Well, I think that affordable housing and slower growth are not incompatible. If we take the growth issue and divide it first between commercial growth and job growth, of which Palo Alto has more than 3 times as many jobs as workers who reside here, we've had a discussion on one track, should we be slowing down significantly the rate of commercial growth? That, by policy decisions, including the council now having adopted the slower commercial growth initiative that was a citizens initiative and would have been on the ballot if the council hadn't adopted it, we've largely settled most of those commercial growth issues. There's still some that matter. And then we're able to switch to looking at housing, both market rate housing and affordable housing. I've thought for a long while that the community would be much more willing to embrace housing growth if it has first lower impact. So we need to look at how to have housing with the least number of new car trips generated that we can. If we slow down the commercial growth, and then if we figure out a way to truly address the transportation issues and the congestion issues, which we haven't done yet.
No.
So I think one of the areas, I was thinking as I came out on Embarcadero tonight, one of the ways that we can get traffic moving smoothly is synchronizing our lights. When you drive on Oregon, you might have noticed this, the lights are all synchronized.
Right.
And that's primarily done by the county. Remember, Oregon is a county road. On Embarcadero, we're not synchronizing our lights yet, and I think, because Pat's talking about transportation, our big issues are transportation, traffic, of course, is the result of that, and housing. There's no question. But I think there are some small things we can do. Synchronize the lights, or we certainly want to look at more shuttles. We want to look at ways that people can get around without jumping in and out of their car on a regular basis.
Okay.
I'll just add that there are some things on traffic optimization. We actually, over the last 5 years, have upgraded all of our traffic signal system to enable smart signals. But we haven't, there's a bit of a project to turn them all on and actually activate that system. But aside from those measures, which we can make some progress on, the real problem is that we have too many cars on the road, and we're having more on the roads each year.
Right.
And we'll get some improvement through things like synchronization, but the real solution, I think, is that we've got to reduce the number of cars on the road. And fortunately, we actually have proven a successful model. We created this Downtown Transportation Management Association, or TMA. On a pilot level, it has shown its success at being able to reduce the single occupancy vehicle trips to the downtown by 30% for that targeted audience. The problem is we don't have the dollars to scale it for the rest of the downtown and the rest of the city. And that's where I think one of the big discussions will be, is whether Palo Alto finally gets on board with other cities on a significant business tax, in all likelihood, to fund the scaling of that program, which actually could reduce the car trips.
And I think we're headed in that direction. Almost every city has some kind of business tax. They might call it something else, but they have some type of business tax.
It's been a long discussed item in Palo Alto.
Yes, it has, a very long discussed item. And I think that's going to come, and definitely the TMI, the transportation management issue, is a big issue. We've talked about trying to do it with maybe Menlo Park and with perhaps Mountain View and East Palo Alto all coming in at the same time. So I hope that we push more on our regional solutions than we have. I think one of the regional positive things that happened, and Pat was very involved in this, was getting some water to East Palo Alto, which really needed it. And it was done, and it's now happening. So we have made strides in some areas, and I think we would be remiss if we didn't talk about that. We do have an affordable housing project that actually is in the architectural review right now. And I have high hopes that we might, actually approve it by the end of the year.
Okay.
I've heard
and
we
you're going to
might-
tell the neighborhood where that is now? Where is that?
The affordable housing project it's on Wilton Court, but it's on El Camino, fairly close to Charleston.
Okay.
So it's basically near the Ventura neighborhood.
Got it.
But I think one of the things on the affordable housing that has been done in the past and we've kind of abandoned is really pulling together a community consensus around affordable housing and a value-based discussion. We've had this tension where affordable housing developers in the city have wanted to say, we've decided we're going to put XYZ at this location and this design, and the neighborhoods are kind of left out of the conversation.
Right.
You may recall way back over 20 years ago, we had the rebuild of the Palo Alto Medical Foundation site and the SOFA plan. We had a value-based discussion back when I was heading that neighborhood group, where the neighborhood said, we want affordable housing in our neighborhood. We want diversity economically and socially, and we embraced it. But that was neighborhood-led, and the neighborhood had a vocal, active role in it. We've seemed to have abandoned that, and I think that that's the next opportunity. And I've had this discussion with Shirley Klein, who heads the Palo Alto Housing Corp, and I'm hoping that we can have that kind of discussion and bring the community enthusiastically on board with thoughtful, affordable housing projects.
And we have a new director who's coming on the Palo Alto Housing Corp.
Okay.
And he will start at the end of the month, actually.
Oh, wow.
And as you probably remember, the funding for affordable housing is what's so difficult.
Right.
And I would say an explanation about what Pat is saying about location, there are only so many locations where there's actually some land that was purchased by the Housing Corp some time ago.
Right.
And that's because funding affordable housing has become even more difficult. But speaking of the housing, speaking of that, our comp plan speaks to adding 300 houses a year in Palo Alto. And the comp plan was adopted this last year. The comp plan was adopted in 2015. And we are now 4 years into our comp plan, which is hard to believe.
Oh. And
So-
how many housing units?
We're very limited on that number of housing units, unless Stanford allows us to count theirs.
It was adopted
Which we-
2017.
Actually, it turns out 2015. I was really surprised, and that's why when we just passed the limit on the amount of
No,
commercial.
the housing plan was 2015, not the comp plan.
Comp
Well,
plan
we
was-
could argue about that as
Okay.
we might.
Okay.
But it's in place now.
Yeah.
We'd agree with that. And we would also say that the housing and the amount of development that's currently allowed, as you know, is about 50,000 square feet. So that was,
Yeah.
that's as of the end of July,
Yeah,
and that also plays into our comp plan.
right.
So,
The big issue, another big issue is the traffic issue, and we've talked a little bit about that with the Traffic Management Association, TMA. And the other thing that neither one of you mentioned was open space or the environmental concerns. Have they been solved as far as you guys are
I
concerned?
have to think, I haven't heard much about the environmental concerns in quite a while.
Yeah.
I think the thing we hear the most is how difficult it is to park at the Dish, which
Oh,
is
yeah.
interesting,
Okay.
and how much use the Dish gets.
Yeah.
And when I met with the president of Stanford recently, I said, we really do appreciate that. Do you do the Dish?
I tend to hike in the open space areas more.
So
Okay.
one does the Dish, one does hiking in the open space.
So-
We're blessed in our area to have a lot of open space that's
Right.
easily accessible. And that's, you know, you can have the open space, but if it isn't accessible, it loses some of its
Nice
punch.
plug for the Mid-Peninsula Regional Open Space District,
Right.
which started in Palo
Yes,
Alto,
yes,
so
that's right,
you can
yeah.
ride the coattails
Yeah,
of
I
that.
was on the committee for the ads that we ran.
Okay,
That was Measure R for Room to Breathe.
right.
Way
room
back
to
when.
breathe.
But Jay, were you talking about that aspect of environmental issues or the broader set of environmental issues? Because we've adopted our Sustainability and Climate Action Plan, which is actually
Right.
a very aggressive, comprehensive set of initiatives that is going to take focus and a lot of work to achieve. And we're looking at significant reductions in our carbon emissions and significant investments in renewable water supplies. And those things won't just happen on their own.
Okay.
So I think that is going to be a big challenge for the community. I think we've had so much momentum on that people are maybe starting to think it'll take care of itself. And I think we're going to return to some real focus on that. Our community, when you look at the community values, that is something that is high on the minds of the people who live here.
So you're about to have some more driverless cars running around
We
town.
have them.
Yeah, I was followed by one a
Yes.
few months ago, and made me a little nervous. It's kind of creepy, I thought. But how many more are likely to come in?
Well,
And-
I don't know, but I watched today, coming back from the Dish, and crossing the railroad tracks, there was a Waymo in front of us, but because there was a large truck there, the Waymo wasn't sure what to do
Oh,
and paused for probably 15 or 20 seconds, which is
wow.
long when you're in
That's
traffic.
a long time. Yeah.
And then finally figured out to go around the truck.
Okay.
But I thought that's fascinating because we are seeing far more Waymos in town, and I think people are a little unnerved by them.
Yeah.
But I think it's the future. I think it is coming. There'll be at some point when we climb in the car and it just drives away for us.
Well, its impact on transportation, though, was something that I think we had initially assumed that somehow it was going to have a favorable impact on our congestion or transportation. The studies now are indicating that it has the likelihood or the trend of an unfavorable impact. The shared vehicles and the autonomous vehicles. I mean, think about it. You got your car and say, Tesla, go get me a quart of milk. That didn't do anything favorable toward traffic. So
There you go.
we're going to have to look at how to integrate those transformative technologies in a way that has a positive impact on traffic and not a negative one.
Okay.
Interesting to think of, isn't it?
my
To think
key
that the
question
modern
is-
inventions are making it more difficult and not less.
Can a Waymo find a parking place easier than a driver? That's the question. So since traffic and parking are the big issues. So anyway.
Although I was recently, we were in Shanghai this fall, and that was rather stunning for traffic.
Okay.
Rather, it sort of takes your breath away when you're in that kind of weaving traffic.
Wow.
But we have some other interesting races that are going on
Yeah,
tonight.
let's go on. Yeah. So name them.
We have our school board race and our open space district race that are
Why don't you
really-
talk a little about the school board race?
Okay.
That's not one that I knew a great deal about, followed it, know who I voted for, but I know you were very involved in that one.
Yeah, we had really 4 strong candidates for 2 spots. And the early results indicate that Ken Dauber is initially well ahead, and the next 3 are just neck and neck. And so we had Stacy Ashland, Kathy Jordan, and Shaunak Darup. And they're all quite interesting candidates. Stacy had really come more out of kind of the, I don't know how to describe it, the traditional school district kind of power structure. Kathy Jordan has been just a very strong critic of the district and their handling of recent sexual assault cases and other issues. And she's been, I would say it's fair to say, a vehement and very strident critic, and one that came on board and raised concerns over things that I think were actually already the focus and the momentum of the reform members of the school board, who were already implementing a whole series of actions in reforms those ways. And then Shaunak Darup is a young 28-year-old attorney who was a graduate of Gunn High School and is somebody who brings the perspective of moderately recent grad who understood the great pluses and challenges for improvement of our district. So that's going to be a very interesting race. That could be tomorrow before we find out who wins.
Okay.
So another observation I would make about that, which is the higher level, is having served on the school board, I found there are few governmental agencies that are harder to serve for than the school board. Parents have such an incredible expectation in Palo Alto for their kids, and they really anticipate that the school board is going to deliver that kind of experience and that their kids will get into the school of their choice, which quite often is Stanford or Harvard or maybe Yale as a stretch school. But it's intriguing as to how much energy and enthusiasm there is around the school board, and yet how difficult a job it is to actually serve on it. So I admire anyone. I stopped at 1 term. I admire anyone that goes on for the 2nd term. And also tonight on the ballot is, should the school board terms be limited to 2? So I'll be interested to see how that comes out. And also Measure Z, which again provides more money for the schools to modernize, to improve from where they were some time ago. And although Cubberley wasn't on it tonight, I think Cubberley will be an issue over the next few years if the latest
I was just going to ask about Cubberley.
Yeah.
Once upon a time, there was a city school liaison committee.
There still is.
There is.
There still is.
Yes, you're right.
And when does it meet? That's
Meets
the biggest
once a month on
a
Thursday
month.
mornings,
Okay.
right?
Publicly scheduled meetings.
Yeah.
Okay.
To their credit,
We're down.
okay.
I'm going
Go
to
ahead.
30 seconds here, and I want to thank you both for being part of this.
Thank you,
And
Jay. It's fun to be
great.
with you.
And it's good to see you both. And good luck. And you're going to run again, right? Is that right?
That's just Liz spreading rumors.
Okay.
Well, I saw his committee starting tonight, so that was it.
All right. So that's great. Well, thank you again, and good luck
Thank you,
to you
Jay.
both.
It's like old times to be with
It's
you, and
been a long time.
you played
yeah.
such a role in Palo Alto and
Well.
in the news business.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thanks, Jay.
So,
All right.
okay.
I think
Well, we're going to